I got my start doing a show, not so dissimilar from this, interviewing authors. And I understand how important it is to support others. And you're doing me as much of a favor as I'm doing you. So, mutually beneficial relationships are a good thing.
That's a cool way to look at it. You used to do a podcast?
I did. I actually started out by podcasting the first three novels on Patio books. I narrated them and gave them away. And afterward, I was interviewed on Patio Racket, which was a podcast show that was promoting Patio Books authors. And after the first show, they asked me to co-host, and I co-hosted for just about 2 years.
It sounds like this was in the wild, wild west of podcasting.
The wild, wild west of digital publishing in general.
Oh, yeah.
When I started out, Kindle wasn't a thing yet. So it was, it's been a journey.
What were you doing then, though? Are you anticipating selling books or online, or how were you?
I was making a series of really terrible mistakes.
There you go. That's how you do it, right? Pixar has done that exact same thing for decades now, to the tune of like billions of dollars. So can't be completely wrong.
I didn't know what I was doing when I started. I ran a print run, spent a bunch of money, then figured out I did not have a sales channel or a retail distribution mechanism that would work with bookstores, and ended up not being able to sell a lot of those books that I produced. And then Moby Pocket came around, and I was having success selling ebooks on Moby Pocket when people were reading on their Palm Pilots. And then Patio Books, a friend of mine told me, hey, you got to check out Scott Sigler and JC Hutchins and these other guys and what they're doing on Patio Books. And I went and did that. And from those things, when Kindle and Twitter and other things came around, I was able to take advantage of them because I was kind of already doing it as it was becoming a thing.
That's interesting. So do you think that, I mean, obviously Amazon's made your life a lot better, easier in terms of being able to sell books directly to readers?
It has. The industry keeps shifting, and the indie author is in a position where, and even traditionally published authors or hybrid authors, which there are a lot of these days, it's actually one of my goals myself.
Yeah, I see you tweeting about
kind of at the whim of what some retailers are doing across the board, and sometimes it's to your advantage, and sometimes it's not.
What did you dream about as a kid, though? Was it to be a publisher or to be a writer?
Tell stories.
Tell stories. Right? I mean, that's where it starts from.
Yeah, I grew up on a horse farm training horses.
I am so happy that you said that, because the first chapter of your first book makes me think you had something to do with horses. Like, yeah, immediately, I'm like, this guy knows horses.
That's how I spent the first 20 years of my life, on a horse farm for, depending from the time I could pick up a pitchfork, I was involved. And when I left, I was a, professional groom, professional trainer, amateur driver, and, decided to go a different way. The industry was changing a lot at the time, and thankfully has come back. But I ended up, going from there. But as a kid, I was never a reader until I discovered A Wrinkle in Time, which has been interesting to see that come back into prominence. It taught me that reading was fun. And then I found fantasy, and I had a group of friends that I read fantasy with. So from the early 80s through the early 2000s, I was just reading every fantasy book I could get my hand on. It's been thousands of them.
That's cool that you had a group.
Figuring out which ones it was, because there was so many.
Right. I mean, I've actually had a few conversations with people about their reading this type of literature, and it's about ripping through it, isn't it? It's about getting to the end and finding out what happens. I mean, there's so many little juicy bits that kind of cling, right? I mean, as somebody who's crafting a story in that way, you have to be aware of the stuff that kind of sticks to the people, like pulls them through.
Well, I always found, I learned from the mistakes of others as well as my own mistakes, and they may not consider them mistakes, but for me as a reader, there were things that I didn't like.
Yeah.
And I didn't like being 11 books into a series and never having had an ending.
Yeah.
That was one of them. And so I write in trilogies specifically because I want every 3 books to be self-contained enough that you could just pick it up, read the 3 books, and be done.
Do you craft the trilogies from beginning to end, or do you just
Yes.
know that you're ending in 300,000 words or so?
Yeah, I pretty much craft them from beginning to end. I had the original global story arc that I knew was going to take at least 6 books. Now it looks like it's going to be more like 12. But that's kind of the nature of the growth path that we take. But I craft each trilogy. I write the entire trilogy. I edit the entire trilogy, and then I release them together. That's been the result of my learning experience of having done it different ways in the past and not having been happy with the results. I didn't like releasing book 1 and having the reader have to wait a year for a book. That did
Yeah.
not work well for the readers or for me.
As a reader, that's annoying. I could definitely tell you that. But as a writer, I just don't see how authors do it, to tell you the
It's
absolute
tough.
truth.
It's tough. I happen to be, I can write really, really short stuff on Twitter. I can fit writing in 140 characters, or I need 100,000 words to tell a story.
That's
I
so
just
interesting.
kind
It's
of
either or, huh? It's
300,000
either,
to tell the full story with an ending,
yeah.
and it's just kind of in between. I have difficulty. Um, so for me, that's just kind of worked into my natural flow. And finishing a trilogy before you release the first book, I find is smart because in the writing of the third trilogy, you'll realize it would be better if you change something in the first book.
Oh man, things like that nag at you too. Like, I
They will.
wish, I wish.
They will. When I'm writing the fourth trilogy, I started writing the series in 2005, and there's 12 books in it now, 9 that I wrote and 3 that I co-wrote. Well, 2 that I co-wrote and 10 that I wrote technically, but I have to go back now and remember all of that stuff.
Yeah, I
And
know,
so
right?
before I write the final fourth trilogy in the main story arc, I got to go back and listen to 12 audiobooks and or read the 12 books, whether, in ebook, paperback, however I decide I'm going to consume each of these, and I may mix it up for a number of reasons. Um, that in itself is going to take me a few months.
Well, yeah, that's horrible. I'm just thinking about having to reread my stuff every time I start a new story. It would drive me to just create something completely unique. I would never want to do that. Be so lazy. I am so lazy.
Well, in this particular case, it's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to the opportunity because as I've been writing an epic series,
Right? Everybody
I've
wants to
opened
do
up
that.
all
That's
those
the
loose ends.
goal, right, of speculative fiction authors, is to write as
But now
big a
I have
world
to
as
close
possible.
up all those loose ends.
Yeah, but you're never going to close them
And
up,
if I
though.
don't know what they are, I'll miss them.
History,
So I like
history
to break it
flaps,
back.
right?
Yeah.
History is constantly flapping. You have these, and that's what's the wonderful thing about writing, right? You always can have that loose end that turns into another 100,000 word novel.
Yep. And I know where it ends. I figured that out during a dentist appointment. And I would tell anybody, if you're going to the dentist appointment and you're going to go under, and you come out from having your dental work, and you tell the people at the dentist office that you figured out the ending of your novel, hope that there's someone there who will instantly counsel you on the memory loss that you're going to experience as a result of the gas and tell you to write it down. Because for me, the next day, I came back for a follow up, and the dentist said, "Do you remember what you told us yesterday?" I said, "No." They said, "Oh, you said you figured out the ending of your series." And I was like, "Wow, did I tell you what it was?" And they said, "No." So I had no idea. A year
That's
later,
horrible.
1 year later, it pops back into my
Okay.
head. Absolutely brilliant. That's how I'm ending the series. But I just thought I would share that for any other writer of an epic fantasy series going to have dental work. Have a notebook handy.
Or record the entire thing just in case you mumble something in the middle of it. I mean, you never know. I mean, my other thought though during that is, what did you have done to your poor mouth that they put you under? I'm 41 years old and I've never been put under once for anything. They give me
Well,
Novocaine and go, here we go.
yeah, I had to have a few things done at once. I had to have a few things done at once, but there was some old mercury in my mouth that wasn't doing well.
Oh yeah, that's not good. Get rid of
No.
that stuff. Oh man, it's like prior generations were trying to poison themselves. Really unfortunate. So I mean, what appeals to you most about